Hey, welcome to Chit Chat Radio. You are on air with your amazing host, Angelique Valentine Diva Everett. Welcome to my special podcast. I have a special guest and good friend of mine, Miss Sophia Roberts. She is a co-worker of Self-Advocacy in Action TV show, and she is a self-advocate. Today's episode, I will be chatting with her on her personal life story. Hey, Sophia, I'm so glad to have you on my podcast.
Hi, Angelique. I'm so glad to be here.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, tell me about Sophia.
Well, I'm Sophia. I live in Buffalo, New York currently. I am the daughter of Mary, the granddaughter of Catherine, and the great-granddaughter of Maud. And I grew up in Rochester, New York, which is not too far from Buffalo. Let's see. What else do you want to know about me?
Well, this is your personal life story. So this was your idea. So
Okay. So I can tell you.
So go ahead. Yeah.
I'll tell you a little bit about
I would love to hear it.
Okay, cool. Well, I grew up. I would say I grew up in a mixed race family. I would say when I was younger, we used to say our family was like a little traveling exhibit of We Are the World. So I am Japanese and French, German, English.
Say what? Mother,
yes, but I was born in the United States, and my mom was a single mom when she had me. So, and when I was 3, my mother married a man who had 4 children already, 2 of whom were adopted from orphanages, and 2 of whom were from his wife who gave birth to them. And unfortunately, she was very tragically killed in a car accident.
That's sad.
Yeah, it was very sad. And so we became a family when I was 3. And so that's how I grew up in such a mixed family. And all different races, my brother and sister. I say sometimes that we're like a microcosm of the United States. My father was a Republican, my mother was a Democrat, and my siblings range from, working class to poor to upper middle class, our family histories. So, and in my family, there's people from the islands, from the Caribbean, from my sister is Irish and African American and Puerto Rican. My older siblings, they're white, but they're from, my mom's white, but she's from England, France, and Germany. My other siblings are white, but they're from like Yugoslavia and that part of Europe. So I have come from a very diverse family.
So you have a lot of races and cultures mixed in. There's a lot of diversity.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot.
I never knew that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, culturally, we're United States people. And both my parents were white, so I would say our family culturally is different from race. We are all different races, but we grew up in the same family culture.
I agree about that. I'm black, but my father was black, but he was a little bit lighter though.
Yeah.
So he had a light way of showing it. That's why I got the lighter skin to kind of. And then my mother's is a little bit darker, so that's why I get that part. But as they always say, father and daughter, I'm a daddy's girl, so I get the skin color from him.
Yeah. But we can all, we can be in the same immediate family and all look different. And that's what my family's like. We all look different from one another.
And my brother, he's a little bit darker. He had to get his darkness from my mother. So.
That's great. That's great. Well, and I guess, one of the things I had told you is that I was thinking about, so when I think about it, people in my immediate family had disabilities, but when I was growing up, I did not think of them, and I still don't think of them as having disabilities. I think of them as having diversities.
Or abilities.
Well, they're not really disabled, like my oldest brother's legally blind, and so when we were growing up, it just meant that he had books on tape and he had large print books. Then I think he went to the Blind Association for some things. He couldn't drive, but he could ride a bike. But I didn't really think about all that. I just he was just him, and he is an administrator in a nursing home now. I don't think of him as disabled, and I don't think he thinks of himself as disabled, but everybody in my family has certain diversities when it comes to learning or vision, like with my brother, or emotions and different things like that.
Oh, I actually had a professor, a teacher that was actually legally blind, and but he knew, he knew my voice and everything. So.
Yeah. So, and I think it was when I got involved in self-advocacy and I met a lot of people with disabilities, then I started to think, oh, I guess I have had this around me my whole life, but I just don't think of it that way. I think of it as just we're diverse.
And it's a good thing you're mentioning that, because I just have a question about that. So let me get into that question, so I don't even have to even ask that question. Well, I just don't even have to ask the question because you always said that. I don't even have to ask that question. Okay. So I'm not gonna even ask that question. You already said that already. Okay. So where am I? Oh. I'm skipping some stuff. You were mentioning about your race, but I'm just gonna put it in here. What do you mean when you grew up in a multiracial family? I'm just gonna ask that question right now. You already told me, but I'm just gonna ask that question anyways.
Well, I will say that one of the things about growing up in a multiracial family is that I did get to see the way that different people responded to like my little sister and I, we're only 10 months apart. Hold on a second, Angelique. Somebody is gonna come to my door.
Oh boy.
I'm doing an interview. Hey, that's okay. Thanks, Marie. So I can start the answer to that question again. You want me to start the answer to that question again?
Okay. That's all right.
Okay. So okay, should I answer that question or do we want to skip it?
We could skip it because when I said tell me about Sophia and I told you what I wanted to hear, you already said all of that technically. So you don't even have to answer that question.
Okay.
Oh, right now. Oh, I know we are in December, but what did you get to do for Disability History Month back in October?
Sure. Well, I work for the Self-Advocacy Association of New York State, and so we have been in our region, a number of students have put on a Disability History Week. So one of the things that we did this year was we had Henry Wesley, who was a survivor of Willowbrook and a longtime member of the Self-Advocacy Association. He came and told his story. He talked about what it was like living in Willowbrook and how he survived that. And he talked about how the disability rights movement and what his life is like now. So we did that at the Central Library in downtown.
I know I was supposed to be a part of it, but then I really didn't have any transportation technically to get there. So
I understand.
I was supposed to go with Noelle because Noelle, she had offered to take me, but then she found out at the end. She found out that she had to work that day. So
I tell you, it's just
yeah,
the way it is sometimes, transportation and everything. Yeah.
yeah. Because I did tell her, and we was gonna do like a little Palms interview in the midst of it and everything. And
Yeah.
she does the Palm interviews all the
Oh, okay.
time. And we was gonna go, and she was gonna hear me read and everything. So it just didn't get to work out that far.
Yeah, that's how it is sometimes.
Which, by the way, we're talking about the book and everything. I have to make a shout out because to let everyone know that I finally put my book in another bookstore. Just to let you know, it's on Parkside.
Awesome. That's great.
And the owner is really sweet. Her name is Megan, and it's called Alice Ever After Books. I don't know if
I
you've been to the
love that
bookstore.
store.
Oh,
Oh,
you do?
I do. I know that store. And then that book is Olivia the Bully. Is that the book?
Yep. And
Awesome.
it's there already because me and I was out and Jimette took me. So, and they're going to be selling my books there.
Wonderful. Well, I'll have to look for it because that's a great bookstore for kids. That'll reach a lot of young people. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, I went there with my temporary staff that I had over the summer, and we had filled out the online form and everything online together. So
Yeah.
me and her both had put our books in that bookstore. So
Awesome. That's
I'm
great.
kind of happy about it.
Hmm.
So if y'all want, go on down the park side, and it's called As Ever After Books, and I'll send you the address and let me know. I'll come on down and personally and sign the book for y'all. And it should be on their website too, asEverAfterBooks.com.
That's awesome.
And let them know that Enzik sent y'all. All right, so I know you had told me about your great grandmother. What kind of she was institutionalized?
Yeah. So
What happened? Wow.
does that mean?
Oh, how did you felt when she died in institution?
Well, I feel very sad that she died in an institution. I never knew her. And
What? Oh,
I can tell you the story if you'd like to know.
go ahead. Go ahead. This is your story. So go ahead. I'm listening.
Well, one of the reasons I feel so strongly about the idea that people shouldn't live in institutions is because my great grandmother, in the very early 1900s, she had what people today would call like a mental health crisis.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. It happens to us sometimes. And she, at that time, um, this so-called state-of-the-art best care was in institutions. And she was put into an institution in Illinois. And whatever they did to her there, it very quickly it made it so that she could not recognize her children. When what happened to her is that she lived there. She went in probably in her 40s, and she lived there until she was in her 70s, and she died there. But at that time, there was a lot of stigma about mental illness and what people call mental illness, which I don't believe she was. I believe she had a mental health crisis, but I think if she were alive today, she would have gotten help and recovered. But at that time, they put people in institutions, and the institutions were actually very terrible places to be. But the saddest thing to me is that when her daughter went to get married, her daughter's family found out about her mother, found out that her mother had been put in an institution. My grandmother, when my grandmother went to get married, and they called off the wedding because of the stigma about mental health. So my grandmother didn't want that to happen to her children. She didn't want that to happen to her children. So she told her children that their grandmother had died. And that to me is the saddest part, because they never got to meet their grandmother. And I never got to meet my great grandmother. And my great grandmother never got to see her grandchildren, meet her grandchildren. So to me, I think that that is a tragedy. A lot of women in the late 1800s got put in institutions, and they were treated terribly, and they never got out again. And so that's part of my family history, and it makes me feel very strongly about the idea that people don't belong locked away in institutions, and that's not the best care.
That's
It is. It's very sad. Yeah, it's very sad.
That's just like people with disabilities. They get institutionalized.
That's right. People and that's exactly right.
Which is sad too. So
it is sad, and that's why I do. That's part of why I do the work I do, because I don't ever want to see that happen to anybody if we can help it. I think our society is much better if we're respected for all of our differences and diversities and ways of thinking and being. I mean, if you were in an institution, could you do this podcast?
No.
No, everyone did not get to see your smiling face and your Santa hat and your little lights across the top, and that would just be so sad.
I think you got that right.
Terrible, yes. So.
All right. Well, now this section of my podcast, I always put like a positive quote in here, inspirational quote. And I love this quote that you had sent to me. So
okay.
A great question refines to be answered. So it keeps leading us into deeper connection with each other, which is by Judith Snow.
That's right. Now
I think kind of like that quote.
No, good. I'm glad you do. Now, do you know Judith Snow? Do you know who Judith Snow is?
I don't think so. I think I probably read about her. I don't think so.
Yeah. So Judith Snow was a woman with disabilities. She only had use of 2 fingers.
Oh.
She was an artist and an activist, and she is the first person who came up with the idea of a circle of support or circle of friends.
Oh.
She was a very creative woman, and you can find her on YouTube. I suggest to look her up. She said a lot of very interesting things, and she was very significantly disabled, and what a brilliant woman, Judith Snow.
I have to look her up. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Highly recommend it. Yeah.
Well, when I was thinking about that, putting everything together, I was like, let me see if Sophia can help me with the quote.
Well, I'm glad you asked.
Now, I always have a positive vibe corner, and I always ask the question, what one positive thing that you do in general? So I gotta come up with that question, and I always have to ask the question. So, Sophia, what do you do in general in a positive way?
Well, I will just tell you, I love to dance, and so I found through the pandemic, I wasn't dancing. And so I decided there's a little space here in my building where I can dance. So I take one song, part of my routine every morning. I take one song and I dance to that song. So, and I just dance my heart out to that song. So that's one positive thing that I've been doing lately every day.
Well, that's good. Well, I'm trying to think one positive thing that I do. Oh, well, I was Noelle gave me like these little self-care box with the affirmations in it.
Yes.
So I kind of been doing a couple of affirmations. One when I was a little under the weather, I actually did a social media detox.
Yes.
And ever since then, I've been ever since then, I've been doing like a couple of weeks without not going to social media altogether.
That could be a good
I
idea.
know it's kind of hard because YouTube kind of falls into that in a way. So I'm like, well, I'm just gonna not look at the phone, put the phone away, and just watch TV or do something else.
Right? Do something in real life. Can I tell you my favorite affirmation, Angelique? I don't know if you like this one, but my favorite one that worked for me a long time ago was I put it on my wall and it just says, I can, I will. And I would look at that every day. So I give that to you. You can, if you like that one.
I like that. And then the other affirmation, which I haven't really got into yet, is read an inspiring book.
Yes.
And the one book I wanted to read is oh boy, I don't have that on me. It's Forgiveness. I got a book that's based on forgiveness. So I wanted to read it. My aunt had sent it up to me, and I got into reading it and then stopped. Now I said I was gonna get back into reading it again, and then I just haven't got back into reading it again.
Well, it's always there for you, right?
So now I gotta get back into reading it. So,
awesome.
So that's all my positives in my life. Oh, and I got my book in the bookstore. So that's something positive.
Definitely.
And spoiler alert, I am writing a second book. So that's my positive as well too.
Wonderful. That's wonderful.
But details to follow, as I always say, details to follow.
I'll keep my eye out for those details. Now, is that going to be a sequel to Olivia, or is that going to be a different thing altogether?
It's kind of like a sequel, but not really, because the first one is about bullying. This one is about being polite to yourself and others. So
nice.
Yes. I feel, and it's really being respectful, respect and being polite to yourself. So, respect and polite is kind of together in a way. So I see how people not being that respectful nowadays. So that's why I thought, why not come up with a book like that?
I love it. And I think that idea of being respectful and polite to yourself first is great. Yeah, because then that emanates out from there to others probably. But that's I love that. I have to look for that.
Well, I would definitely, like I said, details to follow. So I would definitely, and you will be the first person to know. So
awesome.
I'll make sure that you know. All right, well, this has been another episode. This has been another episode of Chit Chat Radio. Thanks, Sophia.
Thank you, Angelique. We'll see you later.
Hold up. See, now you got me off kilter now.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, okay. You can now use Chit Chat Radio to like me. No, I can't say podcast. I'm sorry about that. You can now use Chit Chat Podcast to like me on Facebook. Also follow me on Instagram at Chit Chat Podcast 14. You can also follow me on TikTok as well at Valentine Diva 214. I will be making some TikTok videos on my podcast for the near future. I do have a surprise that I wanted to tell y'all, but I'm going to wait for my 5th episode. So unless you want to know now, because I just created an email address for the podcast, so y'all can book, and I'm saying book my podcast, so you can book to be on my podcast with me. So, and then you can also, if you want, you can DM me on Instagram at Chit Chat Podcast 14. And that's it. I'm your host, Angela Everett, and this has been another episode of Chit Chat Radio. I will holla right back at y'all next time, and please be safe.